All right, well, let's go ahead and get started here. See some people are already joining in. I know we're going to have some more hopping in here soon. Thanks so much for you guys joining us here today for our webinar about high-risk deals and the things you guys need to know about underwriting and the things you guys need to know to be able to win more of those high-risk deals. Really fast again, of course, I'm Ryan Dosen, Director of Sales here at Host Merchant. Going to have some other team members on with us today. Eric is here to join us. Maybe Chris is going to be able to join us as well. Same deal as always. Go ahead and type in questions along the way while I'm kind of talking here, and our team members should be able to hop in and answer questions. We'll have some time for Q&A here at the end as well, but a lot to cover here today. So, but before we hop into high risk, again, here at Host, your success as an independent agent is our top priority. We're here to provide you dedicated guidance, fast responses, real solutions to get people boarded fast. You guys have personal relationship managers that are there to help guide you along the way and help provide you the insight that you need to win your deals. And we feel like it's, along with these other things that we're doing, like these webinars, we feel like it's the type of thing that makes a big difference for you all as agents so that you can get out there and win more deals. We provide you access to a fairly unmatched selection of payment technologies, which we've done a lot of webinars on here recently, from Valor, Deja Vu, Clover, Ingenico, Swipe Simple, as well as some of our in-house technologies like the Cloud Manager Suite and a ton of different gateways. And those gateways in particular are things that a lot of the high-risk merchants that we're here to talk about today are going to wind up needing to use. So without further ado, let's go ahead and hop in here. I'm going to share my screen and we're going to dive into high risk. All right. And again, welcome to Win More High Risk Deals, Underwriting Insights for High Risk Merchants. I'm looking forward to taking a deeper dive with you all to let you know about the things that, the additional hurdles that there are to traverse when it comes to high risk deals, so that you know what you're getting yourself into and so that you're able to kind of, set good expectations with your merchants so that when you get your applications in, they're as complete and accurate as possible. And so that'll give you a much better chance to actually get approval there. Again, we're going to take a closer look at underwriting and high risk deals. And again, our goal, of course, is to help you win more business and get them approved faster. All right. So really quickly, kind of why high risk and why high risk might be interesting to some of you. Well, first of all, a lot of payment processing, merchant services companies, are, they don't take high risk. We do high risk processing and we're actually very highly rated for high risk. We actually get a ton of people inquiring with us because we're very highly rated online because we do a fantastic job. Basically, if a high risk deal can get done, we're the people that you want to come to get those deals done. Okay, so again, I know some of you all may have relationships not just with Host, but if you're ever dealing with high risk, you really do want to make sure that you're contacting your RMs and coming to us because this is something we're very highly rated with along with everything else, but especially high risk. And it's something where, if you do the application the wrong way, you don't put the right info in there, you put the wrong thing in there, it can wind up sabotaging and breaking the deal. And this is a high risk, high reward situation, so these deals can be very profitable, but again, they can be lost very easily as well, so our goal here today is to give you kind of an overview about some of the potential pitfalls, the things you need to be looking out for. And of course, you're going to want to be contacting your RMs. You're going to want to be doing this through us because, there's customer service in general, that's really stellar here with Host, but in particular with high risk, a lot of people can't get things done the way we can get things done, in addition to the great service and great rates. All right, so high risk, we want to talk a little bit here about, what does high risk even mean in payment processing, give you guys some examples of high risk. There's some verticals that may not even feel like high risk that are high risk. And why the banks and underwriters are applying stricter standards here. Okay, so there's several things that the banks are going to be looking for in terms of classifying something as high risk, and it's not always just, is it adult, is it CBD, is it stuff that's kind of, maybe on more kind of like fringe of society. That's not necessarily the beginning and end of the story for high risk. One of the biggest things that the banks really care about is the risk of chargebacks. Okay, so in addition to, adult CBD, multi-level marketing, stuff like that, that's kind of maybe a bit more fringe and therefore possibly more likely to see a chargeback. There are other industries, that can see a higher incidence of chargeback, that winds up getting, a particular business vertical that might seem completely innocent and completely normal, but it still gets classified as high risk, like for instance, travel, maybe supplements, online subscriptions, different things like that. Bookkeeping, okay? And bookkeeping is not necessarily society fringe. It's something we all have to deal with to some degree, right? But that, in many cases, that's going to be considered high risk. Okay. So again, any vertical where there's an increased risk of there being a chargeback, is a candidate to be considered high risk, right? Because if there's excessive levels of chargebacks, the banks have to be very sensitive to that because, they have to shut down the account, terminate the account or fines or something like that. If you have a business that's just seeing too much in the way of chargebacks. Okay. Why does travel, for instance, which is not fringe at all, why does that see a higher chargeback rate? Well, cancellations, delays, disputes or disruptions in, I paid for something and I'm not really getting what I thought I was getting. Online subscriptions, same thing. Sometimes people will forget. I know I've forgotten many times about it. I can't believe I'm still paying for this, and, sometimes instead of canceling, people will try to charge things back, right? Certainly nutraceuticals, supplements, people kind of complaining about, hey, this didn't work the way it was supposed to. I was supposed to grow 6 inches taller, with this medication and nothing's happening, right? So again, one of the takeaways here is they're going to be looking for merchants. We want to have clear billing descriptors, clear refund policies, clear customer service channels. The underwriters are going to want to have reassurance that merchants can keep chargebacks under control, right? So, there's going to be a lot of different things that are going to be looked at in terms of whether a particular deal gets approved or not. And a lot of that's going to fall under the umbrella of the bank just saying, hey, are we going to be seeing a lot of chargebacks here or not? Are there some indicators that, there's not a lot of things in place to avoid that? It's likely to get declined. Okay. Other things, there are actual regulatory concerns, right? So there's, certain industries that face stricter federal, state, or card brand regulations, like, CBD, hemp, where there's varying laws state to state, FDA scrutiny, obviously like adult stuff, you've got age verification requirements, obscenity laws, possible international issues there, firearms and tobacco, more federal and state licensing issues, restricted products. Okay. So those are, regulatory concerns can certainly place, something in the high risk category because the underwriter is going to worry, okay, well, are we going to is this merchant going to possibly break a rule and cause a big problem here? So you need to make sure that the merchants, when they're going to be doing their application, they need to really be able to demonstrate that they are complying with all licensing, permitting, disclaimers, all that stuff. You need to be proactive in assuaging the underwriter's fears that we might have an issue here, right? So, and you don't want to just take the approach of, well, I'll just get this application in there, and then if they reject it, then I can go ahead and make it up later. Sometimes these underwriters will be like, nope, in case closed, and we're not going to reconsider it, right? And so even if you come back, it can be much more difficult to try to come back and improve the look of the business. Excuse me, I'm getting over a cold. Improve the look of the business, make it friendlier in the eyes of the underwriter. You don't want to do that after the fact, right? You want to come in and you want the underwriter to be like, okay, this is a high risk business, but man, they've got their ducks in a row. Everything looks fantastic here. Everything looks really buttoned up. If we're ever going to do business in this vertical, this is the type of business that we want to be working in, okay, or working with. And that's a message that I'll probably beat the drum again a little bit later on too. With high risk in particular, you want to almost take a step back and you want to ask yourself, hey, if I was the bank, right? If I was the one that was sticking my neck out there for this business and risking, possibly losing money or fines or anything like that, would I feel good about putting my name behind this particular business, right? And if the answer is no, then their answer is probably going to be no. Okay. And if the answer is maybe, then you need to ask yourself, okay, well, what would make me feel better about this being the exact, if I'm going to do business in this vertical, that's the type of business that I want to work with. What are some additional things that need buttoning up, that need to be a little bit clearer for this particular business? Okay. And again, you don't have to necessarily be an expert in the vertical, but a lot of things, especially for those of you that have been in the business a while, you kind of know a little bit about the business, you know a little bit about some of the pitfalls, and talk to your RM as well, of course, and they'll tell you, hey, these are the things they're going to be looking for, and you want to get that all looking great before the application goes in. Um, little bit of a sidebar issue, that's kind of a tangent on this. Excuse me. I had a um, I had a company that I was working with, and they were selling like video game stuff, like video game apparel or sometimes little video game devices. And they had been match listed. And they had been match listed because they were selling a device on their site that they say they didn't realize um, was violating any laws. But basically, if any of you are familiar with video games, there's been a lot of video games over the years, right? And so there's emulators or technology that basically kind of takes a copy of the old video games and they bundle like everything that was ever played in the Nintendo and they put it in a little box and sell you and let you play the Nintendo. Well, that stuff's copyrighted, right? There's a copyright there. And so this merchant was selling that stuff and his account got shut down, because they were worried about possibly breaching the copyright laws. And so then we're working, attorneys are having to get involved now, where we're trying to assuage the underwriters' fears that, hey, these rules aren't going to be broken in the future, right? So you want to, it may be helpful to take just a closer look at the business and see if there's anything there that you feel like, hey, maybe this is not okay, or maybe if I can make the underwriter feel better about it, I want to take that extra step to make sure they do. Lastly, on this, reputational issues, of course, some banks have just decided they don't want to have anything to do with adult entertainment and gambling and dating services and debt collection and MLM. Okay, so that's a concern as well for high risk. We do have banks that we can board business with in those spaces. And again, there's heightened requirements there, but that's just another thing that goes into what causes a bank to decide, or the banks to have collectively decided, hey, this is going to be a high risk industry that's held to a higher standard. Okay. All right, so let's go ahead and move on to the underwriter's perspectives. What are they looking for? Again, in terms of being able to make the underwriter feel like, hey, this one in this vertical looks really good. If we're ever going to work in this vertical, this is the type we want to look for. Okay, so ideally, you're able to make your case for several years in the business, prior processing experience, and there's some verticals we'll talk about later where they actually have to be able to show that or it's a non-starter. Okay. Financial stability, bank statements, reserves, chargeback ratios. So one thing we'll see is sometimes it'll be a new business and they'll say, well, if I don't have any money in the business bank account, right? We have seen cases where, okay, well, the banks do still need to be able to see, okay, well, if this is a higher risk of going sideways, we got to see that there's money somewhere, right? So it might be that if there's no history or not a lot of money in the business bank account, potentially the person signing for the account, the owner, maybe they're providing their own personal bank statements to show that, hey, there is money here backing this business. And if things do go sideways, we feel good about extending kind of credit, so to speak. We had another one before, and one issue with, there was a particular merchant I can remember from several months ago, and the hurdle that we had was that all the transactions were high dollar amount, right? There were thousands of dollars, like a $5,000, $5,000, $6,000, $3,000, right? But the business bank account did not maintain that level, right? It was kind of money in, money out, money in, money out. And so this account did not get approved because they could see that the size of the transactions was high, but there were not enough reserves in place in case things went sideways, right? So if they had all of these big transactions happening, but there was never very much money in the bank's thinking, well, if things go sideways and there's a chargeback, we need to feel confident that we can go grab the money from you, as opposed to having to chase you. Okay, so reserves can be important as well. Ownership background, excuse me, credit matters. A low credit score is not great. Sometimes they'll even get kicked back and they'll say, hey, is there someone else that can sign for this business? Because the credit on this particular signer is not great. Have there been past issues? Marketing, what does marketing look like? Is there compliance is the website compliant? Terms, conditions of the refund policies clear? Processing structure, are there realistic monthly volumes and average ticket sizes, right? So, if the business is coming out of nowhere and there's no reason to believe that they're going to be doing much business, but they're going to be claiming a ton of volume, that's going to be a red flag, right? Is it possible? Sure, it's possible that someone could start a new business and immediately have crazy monthly volumes and high tickets. But again, ask yourself, if you were the underwriter, do you feel good about sticking your neck on the line and just sending out tons of money to a brand new business with no track record of anything, that doesn't have any money in their bank account? And if something goes sideways, I don't know if we're going to be able to get the money, right? So that's the question. Again, think like the underwriter. What would you want to see? Okay. Some businesses also, we do a lot of high risk deals with online businesses. Okay. And so there's additional questions again that, for an online vendor, what might the underwriter look for? Okay. So I got an application just yesterday with someone that was selling fitness equipment. Okay. Well, if I had just submitted that application for the fitness equipment, the underwriter would have come back to me and said, okay, where's the equipment, right? Or is this a drop shipping situation? If it's a drop shipping situation, fine. Provide us the contracts that show that this particular vendor has already arranged for when they take an order, there's another company that's going to fulfill the order. And is there a CRM that's going to be tracking everything? Okay. Like, do they have all that chain of, do they have that entire chain of order all the way to delivery? Is that all accounted for? Do we feel good about everything being in place? Or is this person just taking orders and hoping things work out, flying by the seat of their pants? If they look like that, it's not going to happen, right? So I had to go back to my client and say, hey, are you drop shipping or do you maintain the inventory? If he had said, I maintain the inventory, I'd be like, okay, send me pictures of all this big fitness equipment, right? And I have had that happen too, right? Where the underwriter says, okay, if they say they have the inventory, we need to see the inventory, okay? Property rental agreements, right? Okay, is there going to be a storefront that's not open yet? Okay, we have a picture of the store. Well, do you have a lease for that for that location? Do we have proof? Do we know that you're actually setting up a business there? Do we know that you actually, that this is the actual location that you're going to be operating out of? Okay. So again, what would you want if you were extending this credit to this business? Do I feel really good about this is a legit business that I feel good backing? Okay. Okay, common pitfalls. Okay, we've talked about a bunch of these already. Missing or incomplete documentation, inconsistent business details, okay? Bank account mismatches, website info doesn't line up, okay? So we've had deals where the underwriter's gone and they will do their due diligence, right? They'll say, hey, what's going on? You listed this as the main address, but I see this other address on their website. What's going on? Which is the real address? And that can blow up a deal, right? Certainly if bank accounts aren't lining up, that's a big deal, right? Unrealistic volume projections, non-compliant websites. We talked about that. Or just there's no contact information. We don't have a way. What's the refund policy if things go sideways so we don't see a chargeback? concealing ownership or business type, right? So there's some websites where there's just not a whole lot of information. Well, the bank's not going to like that. The underwriter's going to go to their site. The underwriter's going to Google them. They're going to see what's out there. Okay. And if it doesn't look good, if it looks shady, if it looks fly by the seat of your pants, guess what? Probably not going to get approved, right? So these are things that you want to identify as an agent and be like, okay, hold on, hold on. I know you want to get approved fast, but let's take a look and let's make sure the business looks good, because we don't want to submit an incomplete or a suspect, or what kids would call a sus application, right? And then they got a bad taste in their mouth about you and you're not going to get approved. Okay. One other thing I want to mention, lack of U.S. presence. So we do get a lot of inquiries, especially with the high risk space where, you have people out of the country that are trying to do business in the country. Generally speaking, the businesses need to have a U.S. presence, here, which means that they've got U.S. bank account, U.S. corporation or LLC. Okay. Um, you know, a U.S. Social Security number. If they have an ITIN, an ITIN, okay, well, fine. But do they have an actual physical address? Do they have an actual presence here in the States or not? If they don't have an actual presence here in the U.S., might not work, right? Now, doesn't happen all the time, but I had a really nice deal that was really close to getting done. And unfortunately, the U.S. presence, it wasn't enough U.S. presence for this out of the country individual to even own a home in Florida. It was viewed as not enough. It's not always that way, but in this particular case, they just felt like that wasn't enough U.S. presence. Okay. Other things to take a look at for enhanced risk or pitfalls for potential chargeback risk. So again, we talked about refund policies, overly aggressive marketing, guaranteed results in 7 days. You're going to grow 6 inches in 6 months, something like that. The underwriter's going to look at it and see it looks suspicious, and they're going to be like, no, thanks. Okay. Also, you want to review the checkout process, and when you're reviewing the checkout process, if you can't find how they're going to get refunds easily, neither will the customers or the underwriter, and it's not going to go well. Okay. Regulatory concerns, we'll talk a little bit more about that now, but that's going to have to get buttoned up, and they're going to have to feel really good about regulation being tight. We talked about kind of anonymous ownership, thin websites with generic stock photos, little contact information, not a lot of business details. That's a red flag, and it's probably not going to get approved. Okay. But it's something that can be fixed if it's a legit business, and you just say, hey, I think we need to make this look a little bit more, complete of a website and a better complete picture for the underwriters when they go looking. Vague or misleading marketing. Also negative reviews online. I know that's not usually something we can fix quickly, but if a business has bad reviews online, the underwriter is going to look, they're going to see them, and that can wind up sabotaging the deal. It may be that they need to do some work on their online reputation. Okay. All right. How agents can guide merchants. Okay. Again, you're going to position yourself as a trusted advisor by preparing them with the stuff we've talked about today. Okay. Again, this isn't fast food. They're going to want to move fast, but again, you got to caution them. Hey, moving fast is not always the right thing, especially in your vertical. We got to make sure the application looks great and it looks great from the beginning. Okay. Walk through their website for compliance. Be transparent with the underwriter as well. Be proactive, explaining, things. Being proactive is better than sitting back and hoping that they're not going to notice and then dealing with it later. You don't want to do that. Okay. And of course, leveraging our support team. We're your partners here. We do this every single day. So if you've got a high risk deal, talk to your RM and make sure that you're in a good space in terms of your application and that you're not just running it through. Okay. Talked about clean applications, build a relationship with a merchant by showing that you know the process. Of course, if you're able to use some of the details we talked about today, your merchant's going to better understand why it's more important to move a little bit slower and a little bit more deliberately. When you're able to come off as an authority and someone who does this all the time, and you really know what you're talking about, then they're much more likely to listen to you. Okay. Some quick examples of like additional hoops to jump through, right? So CBD being one of them, right? So there's additional compliance fees for CBD, right? For e-commerce merchants, there's a required 3 months of recently processing a history of 15K minimum monthly volume, okay? Now, some of you might be like, okay, well, how do we get that? How do we show the history if we need the history? How do we get the history to show the history if we need the history to show the history, right? So there are some processors out there that are a little bit looser, but they're also more expensive, right? So it could be that you've got a merchant that's paying through the teeth for payment processing through someone else, but they have a history. In some cases, like with CBD, a lot of times you're going to need to actually show a history. Okay. Make sure that the certificates of analysis are up to date, and within the last 12 months, there's addenda that have to get signed, website age verification that's needed. With the certificate of analysis, the delta 9 THC must be less than or equal to 0.3%, stuff like that. But that's, your RM's going to know this, and this is stuff that you're going to have to actually be able to prove. Okay. Again, fulfillment or vendor agreements or proof of inventory if they're making it themselves. Okay. Kratom is another thing. In this case, geofencing for prohibited jurisdictions. So, is there something on the site where it's specifically not going to be sold within these fenced off areas, right? Additional addenda just for that. Okay. Coaching and seminars. And my boy Tony Robbins here. Okay. What's needed there? Well, they're going to need to have the marketing practices agreement and addendum, signed. And yes, the underwriter is actually going to want to get a login to go onto the website and actually take a look at the courses and offerings. Right? So that happens. That's happened to me whenever I've done this particular vertical, right? Yes, the underwriter will actually want to go and log in sometimes and poke around into the programs and see what the experience is going to be like so that they can judge the risk of chargeback. Okay. So again, coaching and seminars, that seems normal, but that's high risk a lot of times. And they're going to do their due diligence. All right. So, man, I almost hit it on the nose today. Covered a lot of stuff. I'm going to check for questions here in a second. Again, you all know that Host is extremely highly rated across the board for customer service. We're also very highly rated, and we do a lot of things. We're able to get deals done in high risk that other processors simply are not able to get done, right? So next steps would be if you have any high risk deals, you got to talk to your RM. You can reach out to me as well, and we'll help guide you for that conversation that you're going to have with the merchant to make sure all the ducks are in a row there. Okay. Really fast again, the promotion for the Cloud Managed Suite is still going. Okay. Spoke with somebody yesterday that's getting onboarded and they're not going to pay for the software. It's for a nail salon. Okay. So a nail salon that I spoke with yesterday, they're hopping on board. They love the software. I haven't told the tech team yet, but I will be shortly that they're going to be onboarding a nail salon. Okay. So again, the software is very flexible and it's still complementary for people that are for businesses that are doing their payment processing with hosts. Tremendous value. These people are going to save a lot of money. A lot of people have saved money. So reach out to me on that. All right. So let me see if we have any questions. I don't think so. All right. Hey guys. So I guess we'll go ahead and hop off now. Next week, really excited about next week, sticky solutions, right? Sticky solutions, things that you can, value adds for your merchants that are also going to cause them to stick longer, right? Because they're even more fully embedded with us, right? Not just for payments, but their reward systems and their gift cards and all that stuff is all with us, right? So things like that, they're going to help you keep your merchants on longer for your residuals. So thanks for joining us today. We'll see you guys next week. Talk to you soon.